But what we don't often talk about is the organization or the people that we're trying to affect change for. Are they truly ready? Or do they, in their hearts, want to be ready? They think they're ready, but when it comes right down to it, are they ready? That was where our conversation became really, really interesting.
I'm Hannah Saxmy, your leadership coach, and this podcast is your confidence boost in color. Let's go. Welcome back to Confident Leadership in Color. Today, it's the first time I have a guest that will return to the show. Linda and me, we talked in mid-autumn last year, and our conversation have continued since then several times. I'm really happy to have you here on the show again, Linda. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed our conversation so much. We explore so many different topics. I'm honored to be back. Thank you.
A lot of things has happened since then, and you have been really active on posting articles, really good ones on LinkedIn. One of the subjects you actually returned to a couple of weeks ago was about change and how to actually setting you up for a success going into a change process in some way. And that caught my interest, and I thought that, this is something we should talk about more.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. And there's a lot of studies and methodologies wrapped around change and how to implement change and change management, change enablement. But what we don't often talk about is the organization or the people that we're trying to affect change for. Are they truly ready? Or do they, in their hearts, want to be ready? They think they're ready, but when it comes right down to it, are they ready? That was where our conversation became really, really interesting.
And both of us, we have been leading a lot of different change processes and change projects during our lifetime. I figure that we have a lot to scope up from and take good reflections from. And also that will be good for those that are listening on this one and maybe has not been working so much in that area yet.
That's really true. And you kind of hope that the experiences that you have, if you share them in a way that other people can learn from them, then hopefully some of these experiences can have value to other people. Learning from others, not necessarily mistakes, but learning from others' experiences. And I think when you're working in the fields that you and I have worked in fields like IT service management, project management, a lot of what we do is wrapped around change. And change isn't always successful, not necessarily because the methodologies that you're using aren't successful, not necessarily that what it is you're trying to change, it doesn't make tons of sense, but it comes down to that human element, the people element. And that has numerous layers throughout the organization. When we look at things like organizational change management, we learn that change is positively affected from people take their lead from the very top, from very senior leadership, and then they take it also from their immediate leadership. That you have these two places where people are looking to in order to get their signals. And if those signals aren't coming across loud and clear, then people are even more resistant to change than they normally would be. One of the things that I have learned, and even through some recent experiences, is you can have all of the reasoning and the rationale and the frameworks and everything laid out and everything makes sense. And people are saying they're buying into these changes, but when it comes right down to it, I meant everybody else should change. I didn't mean that I should change.
Exactly.
So it can be really, really difficult because you're trying to use influence, you're trying to use logic. Oftentimes you don't have authority. You have the responsibility of implementing the change, but you don't have the authority or the accountability to push it through. You're relying on these other influencers in the organization that you're working for to support that change. One of the things that I've noticed is sometimes this acknowledgement that change is needed. It's something that looks good on a poster or a strategic plan, but not that real change, not where I've really got to do it now. I can't just talk about it. I've actually got to do it. So, so that's where things get kind of juicy.
Yes, and I think it's connected in some way to the talk we had last time about fear in that sense, because
Hmm.
it's a fear of something like, oh, if there is a change, I have never been there before, this is different from what I've done before. It's some way an identity shift as well, like something is happening around me and I also need to adapt to this and maybe
Hmm.
be different than I have been before. So I think that is also making it more challenging in that sense.
Oh, I absolutely agree. When you're talking about people changing what they're doing, you may be trying to affect change with people that feel like they are experts in their field. They have been doing something a certain way, operating in a certain way for a long time, and they feel really good about what they've accomplished. And when we affect change, we can take that person from being the expert, from being the go-to person, to all of a sudden now they're the novice. And that's very uncomfortable for people. Or we're giving up authority. That's another place that people get really uncomfortable. If we're looking at centralizing a function, for example, versus authority being very dispersed. What if we try to look at things that are economies of scale and centralize the leadership for the efficiencies that we gain from doing something differently? Now we've taken, or the perception is that we've taken something away from somebody. So, I don't want to give up this authority. I'm the ruler of my little kingdom. Don't mess with my kingdom. Go change everybody else. It's like, who is the influencer for that person who doesn't want to give up any kind of authority or doesn't want to change the way that they're doing things, or who doesn't want to not feel like they're the expert anymore? How do you influence that? As the change agent, you only have so much influence without that support from very senior leadership who is supportive of the whys and the benefits and what that pathway looks like.
Yeah, and I have seen it since I've been working on where we have outsourced like a whole department to a different company. People has been working at the old company maybe for 20 years. That it's so connected with that, and suddenly from one day to another, you actually have a new employer that you even haven't chosen to
Right.
work at,
Exactly.
and and still you will deliver similar services, get the paycheck from someone else, but deliver the exact same services from somewhere
Hmm.
else. That is tricky sometimes to, and being in those, I have utmost respect for those that actually go into this kind of change and such in like a open mind and see, okay, let's see what will happen and be curious about that. And then we build it from there.
That's a really interesting example. And I've gone through those kinds of changes, or been at companies that have gone through those kinds of changes. And that's probably the hardest sell of all for people, because not only are you changing the way that they're doing things, but you're changing their employer, to your point, an employer they haven't chosen. But oftentimes that comes with loss of seniority. I've seen that happen where here in the United States, so oftentimes the amount of vacation that you get every year is based on your seniority, and you build up over time. And I've seen it happen more than one time where now you're working for the outsourcer. Well, you're starting back from year one under their rules of employment. So you could potentially have gone from having 4 weeks annual leave down to 1 or 2. That would be a very bitter pill to swallow for
Yeah.
people. That's an example of some quite extreme change where you can almost guarantee that you're going to lose people because they feel like something's been taken away from them. And while you may be able to explain how it's better for the organization, how do you explain that that's better for the individual? That one would be a very difficult pill to swallow for a lot of people. So that one's challenging. I've seen that more than once. And then we've got the change where you're being hired to come in to affect change. And this is where you and I had a great conversation. And it was actually one of the things that drove the article that I wrote was, if you're being brought in as the change agent, how do you ask the right kinds of questions to ensure that that organization that you're going into to affect change for is truly ready for that change. That was a really interesting conversation, where you might even find yourself being recruited to come in. Hey, we want you to come in. We've got this position. We want to change all of these things. But how do you know going in there that it's not just words on a poster or an idea in a plan, that it's real, that people are actually buying into making these organizational changes? But that's where I think, we often say that when you're being interviewed, you're also interviewing your potential employer. And I think that's where that mindset really has to come into play, is the kinds of questions that you should be asking this potential employer to try to gauge how ready they are for change. And of course, these changes can be all kinds of different things. It could be a new system. It could be outsourcing. It could be implementing framework. When we think of things like ITIL, for example, how often have we had an organization that says, we want to do ITIL? We're going to hire somebody to come in and do ITIL. Well, that would instantly tell me to run for the hill, because we don't just come in and do ITIL, as you know. What is it what are the business problems that we're trying to solve? What is the maturity level? What is it that what is the time frames that we're looking at? What does the pathway look like? One of the things that I like to say is, the organization has to set the vision. And if we're coming in to affect change, we're kind of the GPS, right? We're not the people that are setting the destination. You're setting the destination. I'm going to get you there. And as the GPS, I'm going to find the best possible way to get you there. I'm going to try to avoid the pitfalls and the roads with the traffic jams and the car accidents, and get you to your destination in the best possible way. But you've got to set that destination, and you've got to be committed to getting to that destination.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like going into a completely new position in a completely new company. I think it's the same challenge if you're just taking on a new project in a company that you're already working for. You maybe have been working there for many years, because it's similar challenges. Of course, the environment much more, so you have an advantage there. But it's still, because what I often feel is like, from a higher management perspective, they have been working with this, so to say, change process of deciding if we should have the change or so, maybe for half a year or maybe longer. For them, they have been through this process so many times, and then they have taken a decision that, yes, we are going to do this. And after that, they say like, okay, now you handle it. And bye-bye.
Right.
Because
And there
we are
can't be the
done, because we
bye-bye.
need to focus on next change that we need to decide on. Of course, it's not like that. They say bye-bye, but sometimes it actually can feel like that, because
Yes.
it's more,
They may not
it's not our
say
problem anymore. It's yours.
right. They may not say bye-bye, but actions speak louder than words, right?
Yeah.
So if the actions are saying bye-bye, it's bye-bye. So I think the advantage, though, is if you're a change agent from within your own organization, I think your advantage is that you know the culture of the organization that you're trying to change, and you hopefully have built relationships with other people who are involved, with peers or leaders or the stakeholders that you need to influence. So hopefully you've already got a leg up there, where you're able to sit down and have these conversations, trusted conversations, because you have built these trusted relationships, and hopefully that you've got that buy-in. I think it is much harder for people who come in, say, from the consulting world, where they can be viewed as almost like the enemy. You're coming in here to tell us what to do. You're coming in here to change. I don't know you. I don't trust you. I get we're paying you money to do this, but why should I trust you? And so that's where, if the senior leaders have said, hey, we want to do this change, and we found this consulting firm or this external person that we're going to hire and bring in to do change, and then they go hands off, and that person does not know the culture, that person does not have those relationships, they've got to try and build those relationships as a part of implementing change. That's tough.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we take it like this would be a perfect start going into a change, what would that look like then? If we could simulate, because the world isn't perfect. You know,
No.
it will be, things will happen and change and everything. If we would dream and do like this would be the perfect starting point, what would that look like?
I think having an advocate on the inside, if you're coming from as an external person, a consultant, I think you've got to have a partner on the inside, a truly influential partner, a change agent partner. I think that is really important. Somebody who is vested in the success of this change, not somebody who feels like the change is being thrust upon them, because whether they're being consciously or subconsciously, you could find yourself being sabotaged. So I think that's important. I think when you're sitting down, making that decision about whether or not to be engaged in this change, whether or not you're going to choose to take on this role, I think the conversations need to take place at the very senior level with the people who are, interviewing you, if you will. And what does this change look like? Who are your resources? What is my budget? Who are my stakeholders? What are the responsibilities of my stakeholders? And as I said in that article that I wrote, is if those answers feel fluffy, if they feel vague, you might want to really rethink that, because that would be telling me that is not going to be the perfect situation, not even close. But if they're coming back with concrete answers, we have budgeted X amount of dollars, we have budgeted X amount of FTE, you have this authority level, you have control of these things, here is the vision, this is what we're trying to accomplish, here are the measurements that will indicate success. That's a huge one. What does success look like? If that answer is vague, if you're going in somewhere where definition of success is vague, then how do you know that your GPS is on track? How do you know what you're aiming for if the destination is vague and fuzzy? So the determinations, whether or not you are going to be walking into something that's as close to perfect as possible, or at least set up for success, versus something that should be saying to you, do you really want to take this risk? Do you really want to try this? You should be asking yourself, are they really committed? If there's no budget, no FTEs, you have no authority, you aren't internal, you don't have those relationships, you don't know the culture, we must ask ourselves, are you going to be successful? What is going to make you successful if you don't have those things?
And I think it's good questions to have, even though that if you get that fluffy answer on some of that, because that will probably happen, I'm assuming, because they have thought it through a lot, but I don't think they have thought of all the angles and perspective in that sense. Because from their perspective, some things are really clear for them, but putting it in another layer or such, it's not that clear anymore on that level, more detailed maybe. So I think it's more also using that as, okay, here it's actually not so clear for me. This is fluffy, actually, in my world. Based on this fluffiness, I know that there might be a risk here. So how would you like us to handle that together if that happens? It's more like having them also responsible for that, not saying just bye-bye in that level.
Right. I mean, it does require them to stay engaged, right?
Yeah.
Continue with the GPS analogy again. If the destination is, this city, right? Okay, we know we're aiming for this city. We don't care how you get us to this city, but get us. But what if the answer is, oh, I don't know, we want to go north somewhere. You pick the location. That to me would be kind of scary, unless there were some criteria around that destination, what that vision should look like. There's got to be some kind of vision. We're talking about they've thought through these changes. They may not know how to affect them. They may not know exactly what it looks like. They may not know the details. That's your job. But they've still got to be committed to that change and have a reason for that change. And I think that's the challenge. Do they? Because I think if they had all the answers, they wouldn't be bringing you in anyway, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Then it would be done.
So you've got to be bringing expertise.
Yeah, but I think that question, I think you mentioned that, what is success look like for you? Because that also gives a rather good hint on what will they really look for to measure you on in that sense. What are they measured on? It's also that.
Good point. Yes, exactly. What are they? Yes, and that's a great point, Hannah. We bring people in not for their success, although we want people to be successful. But when you bring somebody in or you hire somebody, you're bringing them in because you want to be successful. You want to put that right person in that right role to make you successful. So that, I think you make a great point there. It's a shared success. So we're facilitating each other's success.
Exactly. We need to collaborate in this. That will be the best thing.
Yep. And I think that's the commitment. If you were, asking the right question as you're interviewing for a role, be it external, internal, be it a consultant or an employee, but I think that is that is a great question to also ask. What happens if success is not achieved? What if, the destination on the GPS needs to be changed? What does that look like? So I think that's a great point. And it can be really tough because, of course, if you say, hey, if this doesn't work out, do you have my back on this? The answer is going to be yes, of course. But, so sometimes I think you have to rely on your instincts to decide whether or not are you getting that feel that yes, that is accurate? So their why is important. Their why are we making this change? And you've got to get that sense that they're really buying into the why. If the why is too fuzzy, then the criteria for success will also be fuzzy.
Yeah, and sometimes it's they don't even know it, so they have never done it themselves. Such kind of change. It's more, are they interested or willing to be part of the journey in that sense? So I think that's the important part. There is a lot of research about change projects, and there is like normal number. They say like it's 60 or 70% of all change projects fail. That is a lot of money wasted away. So so it should be something, even those that has taken the decision, that would be important for them to actually make sure it succeeds. If not anything else works, you can always talk about money.
Right. And I think, when we tease apart why change fails, it comes down to a few different things. The success of a change is greatly enhanced by having good change methodologies in place. Good project management methodologies include a really strong change plan where you've got stakeholder engagement, where you've got stakeholder communication, where you've got executive stakeholder support. Those are the kinds of changes, well-planned changes, well-communicated changes, have a far higher rate of success than those that don't. And a large number of the change projects that fail, it's a failure to plan. There's that saying, is it plan to fail? We don't fail to plan to fail. And that's very true. And we see that with a lot of technical projects. And, in my past lives, where I've seen these really well-planned technical projects that are going to impact the business, the way that people do their jobs, and they've focused heavily on the technical aspect and then completely forgot about the people aspect. One of the things that I like to remind our tech side of the house is that if the end users deem your technical project to be a failure, it's a failure. It could be the best executed technical project ever. But if the end users say it's a failure or the business says it's a failure, it's a failure. That is an important aspect of planning that can greatly enhance your chances of success when you're implementing change.
Yeah, so true. As you said before, that they have not decided on this change. They are probably just brought into it and need to adapt in that sense. And of course, I know that they understand that there needs to be a change. Of course, when it started to affect me, then
that's different. Yeah, change them. Yeah, don't change me. Change them. Yeah. But through good planning, through good executive stakeholder support, through good communication, you can get through a lot of these problems. It's incumbent upon having all of these factors working together, truly committed to the change. And, going back to the technical, though I guess we could apply this to any kind of change, we want to make sure that we're sending a clear message that IT, for example, is doing changes for the business, not doing changes to the business. Those are two very different things that we need to be focused on. So being able to clearly articulate the why, and then having support of senior leadership and direct leadership on the why and the benefits, again, you've greatly enhanced your chances of success.
And I think that is like a common mistake in some way, that it's more like IT is an enabler for a lot of changes. It's there. Probably you could have, if you have thought a bit, you could have done it in a completely different way as well, without any changes in the IT. Probably not that efficient. It's probably one of the driver, or cost efficiency or something like that. Sometimes it goes stuck on that it's an IT change in that sense. It should not talk about, so to say, the solution always. It's more like, this is the change we need, and how can we take us there? There might be other roads as well, not only.
Very, very true. And it's that kind of like going back to that, that GPS thing, right? What is the best road to take? If we're trying to use technology to fix business problems, that's probably not going to be successful either. It's kind of like automation, right? If you automate a bad process, all you ended up with was a fast, bad process. You didn't fix the process. What is it I truly need to change? And that can be, manufacturing, it could be information, it could be accounting, it could be security, it could be so many different things. It's like looking into what is it that I'm trying to change, the why, am I committed to making this change, what are the benefits to this change, and then what's the best way to make this change. And if it's through IT, then it can't just be in IT's little segregated world. It has to be what I like to call a IT-enabled business project, right? Not an IT project. Because an IT project, a true IT project, should be completely invisible. If I'm changing servers or changing a network, or I'm doing some kind of a system refresh, that should be completely invisible if you do it right to the end users. So that's an IT project. But if I'm affecting the users in any way, if I'm affecting the way they do their job, that's a business project that IT is simply facilitating. I've probably made a lot of IT people mad by saying that.
It's a good definition in that sense, because I think we forget sometimes for the business to improve that in general. It's not to improve the IT that we can solve.
True. That is, oh my gosh, that is so true. And if the business isn't ready to change, if the business isn't willing to change, then all of the IT investment in the world is not going to deliver those results that senior leadership may be looking for, whether it's efficiencies or cost savings or, whatever the destination is that we're trying to accomplish. If it's not in partnership with the business, if the business isn't willing to change, it's why are you doing it?
And that's where I want to leave you today, with one simple question. Is this change real, or is it just a nice idea on a poster? If you want to go deeper, I put everything into the description. There you find Linda's LinkedIn articles that we mentioned during the conversation, so you can read them in full. And if you haven't listened to our previous conversation that we did during the autumn, you can start there as well. And here is the direct link to the episode. I'm also building something new at the moment, a membership for people like you that wants to grow both the confidence and the self-leadership in color, in practice, over time. If you want to early access, put your name down via the link in the description. And in the next episode, me and Linda will continue this conversation, and at that point we will talk more about how you can set yourself up for success when applying for a new job. If this episode helped, please follow the show and share it. See you next time.